This is the video where you learn everything that you need to know about your Insta360 X4 action camera. The Insta360 X4 is one of the best cameras for shooting 360-degree content. These cameras allow you to shoot videos and photos of everything, and then later you or your audience can decide what they want to look at. And these cameras can also capture certain shots, which are pretty much impossible to achieve with a regular camera. So they can be a bit daunting if you are unfamiliar with how they work. Maybe you've had the camera for a while and haven't fully got to grips with it. Either way, this video is for you. So I'm going to start with getting set up and the basics of shooting video before I move on to some more advanced modes and techniques. But if you're wondering whether the Insta360 X4 is a big improvement over the X3, then watch this next section. So what's new with the Insta360 X4? Probably the most important improvement is the upgrade to 8K video resolution. There's also a larger battery. The camera itself is a little bit bigger as well. There's a new flow state stabilization system, as well as new AI stitching technology. So what about the design? So the Insta360 X4 has a very similar design to the X3. Apart from being a little bit bigger, the only real difference is the grip texture added to the body. The X4 has a larger touchscreen than the X3. So the X4 touchscreen is 2.5 inches, while the X3 touchscreen is 2.29 inches. And as well, the X4's touchscreen is made with high-strength Corning Gorilla Glass, whereas the X3's is made of a less durable tempered glass. The X4 has a larger battery, 2290 mAh versus the X3's 1800 mAh. Insta360 says in a lab environment, this new bigger battery gives you 135 minutes recording time when the camera is set to 5.7K and 30 frames per second. At 8K and 30 frames per second, the X4 can record up to 75 minutes. For comparison, the GoPro Hero 12 will last no longer than 90 minutes when you're shooting at 5.3K and 30 frames per second. The X4 can record in 8K at 30 frames per second, while the X3 can only record at a maximum of 5.7K at 30 frames per second.
But do we really need 8K video? Well, in a regular camera, 8K is probably overkill, but with a 360-degree camera, it's actually much more useful, especially when we come to reframing. That's when you're really going to feel the benefit.
The X4's 8K video is said to give you 78% more pixels than the X3's 5.7K. But what about higher frame rates? Well, the X4 can shoot 5.7K 360-degree video at 60 frames per second, whereas the X3 was limited to 4K at that frame rate. And if you drop down to 4K on the X4, you can now shoot 360-degree video at 100 frames per second. But it's not just about resolution. Video quality is always going to be limited by the bitrate of the video. And the X4 can now shoot up to 200 megabits per second compared to the X3's 120 megabits per second. The Insta360 X4 has a 5nm AI chip, which the X3 does not have. So what's an AI chip for? Well, Insta360 says the chip is more efficient, and it adds a 140% increase in computing performance. The X4 comes with removable lens guards, while the X3 only has the sticky lens guards. And these plastic lens guards are actually a big improvement on the sticky lens guards. With the sticky guards, once you put them on, you're stuck with them, which is why I never used them. But with the removable guards, well, you can obviously remove them. There's also premium lens guards, which come as an extra purchase, but the standard ones are very good, so you might not actually need the premium version. Me mode is a mode that allows you to shoot video without having to bother with the reframing process. While the X3 is limited to 1080p resolution in me mode, the X4 can shoot up to 4K And at faster frame rates, the X4 can shoot up to 2.7K, going all the way up to 120 frames per second. On the other hand, the X3 is limited to 60 frames per second in Me mode. And in bullet time mode, the X4 can capture video up to 5.7K at 120 frames per second, whereas the X3 is limited to 4K resolution in that mode. The X4 can shoot an astonishing 11K resolution time lapses, whereas the X3 is limited to a paltry 8K. And when using time shift, which is the Insta360 name for hyperlapse, or a moving time lapse, the X4 can shoot 8K, whereas the X3 is limited to 5.7K. Whereas the X3 had a Type 2.0 USB-C port, the X4 is upgraded to the USB-C 3.0, which allows faster file transfers. So that's good for those big 8K files, isn't it? Insta360 says the Wi-Fi transfer speed of the X4 is also faster than the X3, giving you up to 30 Mbps compared to the X3's 19 Mbps. When it comes to taking the camera underwater, both the X4 and the X3 are waterproof up to the 10-meter mark without an extra waterproof case. But as usual, make sure all the ports are properly closed and that you can't see any orange before going underwater with the X4. Well, in fact, Insta360 recommends that you don't take the X4 underwater without putting it inside the invisible dive case, even at depths that are less than 10 meters. And that's just down to the way that the water changes the angle of the light, and this can cause some stitching problems to the X4. So what's in the box? In the box you have the Insta360 X4 itself. There's a carry case with zippers, which is perhaps a bit more useful than the basic pouch that you get with the X3. There's a USB-C to USB-C cable, you've got the standard lens guards, you've got a lens cloth, and there's various guides. Something not mentioned on the Insta360 website or in the box is the thermo grip cover, which you do get as standard. Now, some reviewers have mistakenly talked about this as a protective cover, but I think you can see that it's going to be pretty useless for that. What it actually does is reduce the surface temperature of the X4 so that when recording in 8K resolution for a long time, the camera can heat up like any camera this size would, and this cover should make the camera more comfortable to hold. It's not going to make the camera any colder inside, it's just a surface thing. The Insta360 X4 doesn't come with lens caps, but as it's pretty important to protect the lenses from scratches, you might want to think about getting the rubber X4 lens cap. I know you've got these lens protectors, but they also need protection themselves. While they're not too expensive to replace, you'd be better off not having to, wouldn't you? I'd also recommend that you don't lay your X4 down on any hard surfaces that might cause scratches on the lenses or the lens protectors. So you could use the case, for example. Before you start using the new X4, make sure to charge it first. Install a micro SD card, which will be used to store all the media that you capture. And then you just need to go through the activation procedure. To charge, open the USB-C cover and connect to a power source. I just used a USB-C phone charger. And while you're charging, the light on the front goes red, and you'll also get a current battery level on the touchscreen. Install the Insta360 app on your phone, and if you haven't already, make sure Bluetooth is enabled. Power on the X4 by pressing the power button. It's the top button of the two side buttons, and you actually just need a short press. You don't need to long press to turn it on. You're going to see a blue light front and back as it starts to power on. Once the camera is on, the app should detect it via Bluetooth. So connect, and most likely you will then be prompted to install some new firmware. And I recommend that you go ahead and do that. And once that's installed, you can now activate the camera using the app. You'll only have to do this once, thankfully. To install a micro SD card, open the battery compartment, pull out the battery, and slide in the micro SD card. If you have an Insta360 micro SD card, then it should be formatted already. But if you need to format your micro SD card, then just swipe down, tap the settings cog, and then scroll down to SD card and tap format. Insta360 recommends that you use UHS-1 micro SD cards with a V30 or above speed class and exFAT format. As well, Insta360 suggests that you don't use memory cards that are larger than 1 terabyte. But if you do want to shoot the best quality video with this camera, I do recommend that you choose a 1 terabyte micro SD card, because you're going to want to shoot 8K video at a high bitrate, and that is going to mean much bigger files. Before you start working with the Insta360 X4, you will want to decide how the camera goes about saving the battery. So if you're just using the one battery, then you're going to want to save power. But if you have one or more extra batteries, you're not going to need to worry so much, and then you can adjust your settings accordingly. So the Insta360 X4 has 2 power saving methods. Now first, after a set time with no activity, it's going to turn off the screen. Second, if the camera remains inactive, the X4 will power off completely. So by default, it's set to 90 seconds before sleeping and 3 minutes before powering off. If the X4 does go to sleep, you can just simply tap the power button once to wake it up again. And you can also put the screen to sleep yourself, as I said earlier, just by short pressing the power button. If it does power off, you're going to have to power on again. Now, if you want to change the times for auto sleep and power off, swipe down, tap the settings cog, and scroll down to auto sleep. Auto power off is just below. Tap the one that you want to change and choose the setting that you want. If you don't want the Insta360 X4 to switch off the screen when recording, toggle that off at the bottom of the menu. But obviously that's going to use more battery. Below the touchscreen, we have 2 buttons. Left is the record or shutter button, and right is the menu button. On the side, we have the power button, and below that is the quick button. And these 2 holes at the top are microphones. There's also mic holes on the front and the back below the cameras. The Insta360 X4 has a slightly bigger touchscreen than the X3, otherwise the UI is mostly the same. But there are some differences, which I'm going to talk about as we go through. What we can see on the screen is going to change depending on the mode. Now, one little tip, if you want a clear view without the UI, just tap on the screen, and then tap again to bring it back. In the top left corner, we can see how much space we have left on our SD card in hours and minutes. And this is going to change depending on the quality of the settings. So there's obviously going to be less time remaining for 8K compared to if you have it set to 5.7K, for example. Top right is the remaining battery. And if you want to see this as a percentage, just swipe down from the top. Bottom left is the mode, which at the moment is video. And to the right of the mode is the mode's settings. At the moment, it is set to capture 5.7K video at 30 frames per second. Bottom right, we have 2 buttons. One for switching field of view and one for switching between front and back cameras. And this button is actually also a recenter button. So if you see a small dot in the center, that means the monitor view in the camera is off center. For example, if I swipe on the screen to move the view, now I just tap on the button and it's going to recenter it. To change modes, tap the mode button, cycle through the available modes, either by swiping or tapping, and then either tap the selected mode or press the record button below the screen. You can also use the menu button. Just press once and then keep pressing to cycle through the modes. And if you don't want to cycle all the way around, then it's easier just to swipe the screen. To change the settings of the selected mode, tap the information to the right of the mode. So you can see where it says my current settings are 5.7K and 30 frames per second. So to change that, just tap those numbers. Now, another way to access these settings is just to swipe up from the bottom. Now swipe or tap to select new settings and tap again to select. Or you can use the record button actually. To get more advanced settings, swipe left from the edge of the screen. And this allows you to set exposure in different ways. You can set white balance. You can choose between 3 color profiles. We've got standard, we've got vivid and flat. There's various other settings here as well. Whatever mode you're in, swipe down from the top to open up some more general options, including the settings cog. And finally, to view your media gallery, just swipe right from the edge. And with this nice big screen, you get a pretty good view of what you've shot. Something new for the X4 is the addition of lens guard settings. So when you attach these lens guards, it's going to change the image slightly. And so there's settings that readjust the camera to compensate for the distortion so you get a good image. By default, the X4 automatically detects whether you have lens guards mounted, so you don't need to worry about it. But if you want to set this manually, you can. So swipe down to open settings. Tap the lens guard settings button. And now you have 4 options to choose from. We've got auto, standard, premium, and no lens guards. So I'm going to choose standard lens guards because those are the ones that I'm using. Swipe to close settings, and now you can see that there's a new icon next to the battery level. And this is telling me that, what I've just done, which is that I've set it to standard lens guards. But when you have it set to auto, there's actually nothing here but any other lens guard setting, and you're going to get this icon to let you know what you've set it to. Now, the way the Insta360 X cameras work is that you shoot video from 2 cameras simultaneously and then stitch those 2 videos together to create one video with a 360-degree view. So the Insta360 X4 allows you to shoot with both cameras, which is called 360 mode, or with one of the cameras, which is called single lens mode. So when you're in the mode picking screen, at the top you can also select between 360 or single lens. Now obviously press record to start recording. The light starts flashing red and the counter ticks along as you would expect. But you also get a little flag button bottom left. This flag is used to mark places in the video so that you can find them easier later. And you can also use them to help you edit the video. So while you're recording, you just tap this flag and it's going to add a marker. Obviously this might not always be possible depending on where the camera is mounted. One of the issues with 360 cameras is that reframing means cropping in. And the less of a fisheye look you want, the more you're going to need to crop in. But the problem with cropping in is that it means you're going to be reducing the resolution. So therefore, it's really important to start with as many pixels as possible. So while in this section, I'm going to be explaining how to get the best quality video from the X4, you might need to compromise if you want to save battery and memory space. So in video mode, choose 8K resolution and 30 frames per second for the highest quality video. As I say, the downside is going to be bigger files and faster battery drain. And another issue might be overheating. So 24 frames per second is considered the frame rate for the movie look, but I do recommend that you stick to 30 frames per second. The problem with the movie look is that it's not only about frame rate, you also need a slow shutter speed to get that, nice smooth looking video. And controlling shutter speed in an action camera is pretty tricky, as well as it does tend to mess up the stabilization, putting things like ND filters on. And for that reason, I recommend that you stick to 30 frames per second or higher. Now, if you want to have high quality video, but you want to save a little bit of memory and battery, then I recommend that you choose the 5.7K plus setting instead. Now, in low light conditions, I would recommend that you switch down to 5.7K because the 8K and the 5.7K plus settings, they work well in good light, but not so well in low light. Swipe down to open settings and tap the settings cog. Scroll down to image settings. For video encoding, I always choose H.265. But if you do find that your editing system is struggling a little bit with this codec, which is more processor demanding, then switch to H.264. As well, if you are uploading videos directly to social media, some platforms and some browsers still don't support H.265, but for most of the time, I think H.265 is better. Now, if you set video bitrate to high, that does mean that you're going to add about 50% to the file size. So if you're saving space, keep this to standard. Otherwise, for the best quality, set this to high. Below that, set the video sharpness to medium or low. If you select high, then your video might look a little bit over sharpened, and it also might include more digital artifacts. But if you do feel that your video is too soft, you can always add sharpness later when editing. But if you're uploading directly to a platform, then maybe use high sharpness, especially if it's for viewing on a smartphone or small screen. And the final setting here is called in-camera stitching, and this actually only refers to photo mode, as the X4 cannot perform in-camera stitching for video. So I did a quick test, and from what I can see, with this enabled, it takes longer to process a 360 photo, but it should give you better stitching. When we capture 360 media, we can simply use it as 360 media. And then we can upload it to a platform like YouTube, which supports 360 video, and people can view it on 360 headsets or their smartphones. You just need to move it to change the viewing angle as they watch it. And that actually includes 360-degree photos, which can be uploaded to a platform like Facebook, for example, and then viewers can move their phone or mouse to view different parts of the photo. Another way to use 360 media is to reframe it and then export it as a regular video. And to do this, we can either use the Insta360 app for smartphones or the Insta360 Studio for desktop. But if you're looking for the best quality video, then you should use the Insta360 Studio for editing on the go and tons of fun features, presets, and more than just use the app. In regular 360 video mode, the Insta360 X4 has 3 settings for field of view: Mega, Ultra, and D-Warp. So Mega is said to show less distortions at the edges and also gives you an overall better image quality. When you select a field of view, you get a little description that gives you an idea of what to use it for. But if you're shooting 360-degree media, then the field of view you choose doesn't really matter. It's only for preview purposes, because it can actually be changed when you're editing. But essentially, Mega is the widest view, Ultra is less wide, and D-Warp is like Ultra but with the fisheye distortion reduced. And actually, these field of view settings are going to be a little bit different depending on the mode that you're in. In Me mode, for example, you get Max instead of Mega. Now, there's a few features which are a little bit different in the gallery compared to the previous versions. Swipe to open up the gallery. By default, you get the last file that you recorded, filling the screen. Swipe up and down on the screen to go through your media files. In the middle, at the top, you're going to see the number of the media that you're currently looking at, followed by the total number of media that is stored on the card. And you can change the viewpoint of any 360 media simply by swiping on the screen. To play a video, tap the play button in the middle. If you tap and hold a finger on the screen while the video is playing, the playback speed increases to 2 times. On the left, we now have a volume slider. On the right, tap the star if you want to favorite a photo or a video. And bottom left, we have a download button. So you do need to be connected to the smartphone app to use this. And below that button, we have the mode and settings used to capture the media. Tap that and you're going to reveal more details about the media. Now you can see when it was captured, how big the file is, the mode you used, the color profile that you used, and so on. Tap the button top left to open the thumbnail mode. And now you can select media to view by tapping the thumbnail. But this view is also useful for downloading, favoriting, or deleting multiple files at once. Tap the checkbox button. Now tap the thumbnails to select media files. At the bottom, you get the 3 options: trash, favorite, or download. As well, select all by tapping the circle at the top. And if you want to delete everything, or maybe download everything all at once, so it's going to be easy to do that in a single tap. The physical buttons on the X4 have extra functions as well as their main functions. So let's quickly go through those. Press the power button once to power on. When the camera is on, press once to turn the screen off. Long press to power off. And if your camera has frozen for some reason, just press the power button for 5 seconds or more, and it's going to force the camera to shut down. Press the quick button to cycle through the presets. And to begin with, we've got motorcycling, skiing, and outdoors. And once you choose a preset, the camera is set to those parameters. So it'll save you time switching from one activity to another. After you select a preset, you will get a corresponding symbol top right by the battery level. And once we get to the last preset here, we get this plus button. So we tap that, we can actually add more presets to the quick button list. I'm going to add ball sports, and we now get the settings that we're adding, and we can actually edit these settings as well as the name before we add the preset. But I'm just going to leave this as it is and tap add preset. And now it appears after outdoors in the list. And we can also edit a selected preset after we've added it. So we just press the quick button, and then at the bottom below the setting name, we have the media settings. And next to that is a little blue edit button. So just tap the edit button, and now you can edit those parameters as we saw before. For example, we could change the color profile from standard to vivid. And that's going to add more contrast and saturation. So if you want to delete a preset from the list, just tap the blue edit button and then tap the trash can at the top right here. To switch out of the selected preset, just select another mode. So let's say I just switch to regular video mode, and those preset settings are going to be replaced with the regular video mode settings that I actually had before. When the camera is powered on, press the record button or shutter button to start recording or take a photo. Pretty simple, but you can also start capture when the camera is powered off using a function called quick capture. But you do need to enable this in the camera before you can use it. So swipe down to open settings and tap the quick capture button, which looks like a rocket. Then enable quick capture. And once you do that, a new setting menu appears. So just tap that to open up a long list of options. So this is going to be the mode that kicks in when you use the quick capture function. So we can choose a 360 mode or a single lens mode, and we can choose between photo or video. So if you want to edit the mode parameters, toggle on Customize Specs. And now you can edit the settings depending on the mode selected above. Now, when you press the record button, the camera powers on and starts doing whatever you told it to do. In this case, I'm just recording 360-degree video. And now when I stop recording, the camera gives me a few seconds to stop it before it powers itself off again. So if you want to keep going, you want to keep recording more stuff, you need to tap the screen to keep it going, or tap a button. Now, another function of the record button, while you're recording, if you press and hold down the record button, you can cancel a recording. And this means that you stop recording and nothing is going to be saved. Next to the record button is the menu button, and this actually used to be called the lens button. And there are some instructions on the Insta360 website that actually still call it the lens button, but it's now the menu button. And by default, the menu button switches between modes, as I showed you earlier in the video. But this button and the quick button can be customized. Swipe down and tap the cog to open settings. Scroll down to Customize button and select. By default, it's set to select presets, but there's a whole bunch of other options here. You can use it to switch shooting modes. You can use it as a record button, or switch between single lens and 360. You can mark highlights, start pre-recording, and there's a few other options here as well. So you can really use this button for many other functions depending on your preference. Perhaps you find that you never use the presets. and this button is now kind of redundant. Well, you can make it useful by assigning it to something you use more often. Tap the menu button and you can now customize that button as well. You can use it as a power button, a record shutter button, and you can use it to switch between single lens and 360 mode. So what is the point of doing this if you already have a record button or you already have a power button? Well, the thing about action cameras is that sometimes they're fixed to places where some buttons are easier to access than others. As well, if you're wearing gloves, it might just be easier to press a button rather than to swipe the screen. So this customized buttons feature allows you to make your camera much more flexible. The Insta360 X4 has a pre-recording function which allows you to record video up to 15 seconds before you hit the record button. And here's how. Swipe down and tap the pre button and tap start recording. At the bottom, you can see this counter starts ticking as if you're recording video. But if we watch it, we can see that once it gets to 10 seconds, it stops. So what's it actually doing here? Well, in fact, it hasn't stopped. It's now recording video continuously, but it's discarding everything that's older than 10 seconds. So when I press the record button, you can see the counter starts counting beyond 10 seconds. And so what this feature does is to make sure that you have 10 seconds recorded before you hit the record button. And this is going to save you from missing the action. And this can actually record up to 15 seconds before, but that does depend on the mode you're in. So you can't actually set that yourself. So aside from the regular video mode, there's a number of other useful modes. Active HDR mode boosts colors in the highlights and the shadows. However, you can only shoot up to 5.7K at 30 frames per second, and you might find that this mode works better for low light situations. Time-lapse mode allows you to shoot up to 11K 360-degree time-lapse videos, and they're going to come out at 30 frames per second, but you can set the interval from between 2 seconds and up to 2 minutes per frame. So of course it's a good idea to set your camera on a tripod for this. Time shift is Insta360's name for hyperlapse. In other words, time-lapse videos where the camera moves. So you can be walking, you can be running, skiing, and so on. But whatever mode of movement, there are a few settings to think about. So you can choose between 8K or 5.7K. And as well, you can choose how much time is speeded up. So you can go up to 60 times faster than normal. Or you can just leave it on auto. And if you leave it on auto, the camera is going to decide how fast time is going to be speeded up, depending on, how long you record for. So basically, the longer you record, the faster time is going to be speeded up. In bullet time mode, you need to attach the X4 to one of the bullet time accessories. There's the version which uses a string, which is the simplest, and there's also this, which is the multi-purpose bullet time handle. And this is actually a mini tripod, and you can use it for that. So just mount the X4 to the top mount. So this would actually be good for leaving the camera on the ground, and as well for things like time lapses. But there's also a mount on the side. So first, you want to mount the X4 to an Insta360 selfie stick, and I recommend that you use the lightest stick, which is the basic version. And then you attach the bottom end of the selfie stick to the side mount of the handle. And the next step is to loosen this part so the top part can now rotate freely. Extend the selfie stick and start recording, and then swing the X4 around above your head. So of course, be careful, there's no one wandering around who could get hit. And as well, make sure you're a good distance from solid objects, otherwise you're going to destroy your camera. But safety issues aside, I do find using the bullet time string version is actually a bit easier because it's lighter. With the weight of the stick and the handle, I ended up using both hands to keep it steady. But, maybe I'm just a terrible weakling. But there is an advantage to using the stick and the handle because it stops the camera from spinning around. And if the camera spins, it can make the stitching slightly more obvious. Now, in loop recording mode, the camera records video, but it only keeps a certain amount depending on the settings. Most of the regular 360 video settings are available, so up to 8K and up to 60 frames per second. The bottom setting is the loop duration, and you can set that from 1 minute up to 30 minutes. And basically what you're setting here is the maximum duration of the video. If you set it to 1 minute, you'll get 1 minute of video, even if you record for 10 hours. But what you'll get is the last minute of that 10 hours. There's also an infinite setting, but I'm not really sure how that works, because how can you loop an infinitely long recording? Only in a Christopher Nolan movie, I suspect. Is this the first camera with a multiverse setting? Jokes aside, loop recording is especially useful for the X4 as a dashcam, or any situation where you don't know where the good stuff is going to happen, so you can just leave it running and then you can stop it as soon as you capture that moment. Starlapse takes 18 megapixel photos with a very slow shutter speed, which allows you to capture night skies. The camera's got to be fixed in position on a tripod. You can see the manual exposure settings on the right. Swipe to the left to open up these settings so you can adjust them. You can now set the duration of the recording as well as the interval between the photos. And you can go up to a 15-second interval. Burst mode allows you to take 18 megapixel photos in bursts. In settings, you can choose to set a timer, giving you up to 15 seconds to get into position. Because the thing is, with a 360 photo, you need a timer or you're just going to get a photo of your hand. You can also choose how many photos are taken in the burst and for how long. For example, you could have it take 15 photos in 1 second. Or you could have it take 15 photos more slowly over a period of up to 10 seconds. The interval mode is basically the same as time-lapse mode, but instead of creating a video, it creates photos. And it's going to take 72 megapixel or 18 megapixel photos at whatever interval you set. So you can go up to 120 seconds between each photo. So photo mode is pretty simple. You can choose between 72 megapixels or 18 megapixels, 360 degree photos, and you can also set a timer again up to 15 seconds. The one great way to use 360 photos is to capture a moment and your reaction to that moment at the same time. And you can keep the photo as a 360 degree experience to be viewed using, maybe VR goggles, for example, or just by moving your phone around to view different parts. Or you can export a certain section. And as well, you can think about animating your 360 photo in the app, and you can create a cool video clip. The final 360 degree mode is HDR photos, and this uses computational processes to add dynamic range to the photo. In practice, this means taking multiple photos and overlaying them. For that reason, you do need to keep the camera as still as possible for a sharper image. The best idea would really be to use a tripod. So that's all the 360 modes covered. Now let's take a look at the single lens modes. Now if you choose single lens, apart from the addition of Me mode, there's going to be fewer mode options available. In this mode, you cannot swipe the screen to change the view, but you can tap the camera switch button in the bottom right. So in this case, you're going to be using one or the other. You won't be using both at the same time. So if we switch to single lens mode and now switch to regular video mode, the image is going to be cropped either 16:9 or 9:16. Tap the settings or swipe up. And now you can change the resolution, the frame rate, and the aspect ratio. One thing to note here is that if you're in vertical 9:16 ratio, the camera is actually limited to 4K at 30 frames per second, but in the horizontal 16:9 ratio, we can now shoot 4K up to 60 frames per second. As well, there are different field of view settings, so there's no mega view, but you do get action, ultra, and D-warp. And in the 9:16 ratio, you actually only get ultra and D-warp. While Me mode is under the single lens tab, in fact, it uses both cameras and then stitches them together. But the video that you get at the end is not a 360 video, it has a fixed point of view. One thing I did notice is that when you switch to Me mode in 4K 30 frames per second, the memory remaining halves. So it's a bit like when you switch from 5.7 to 8K. So not sure why that is, why it's using so much memory. If you want to use single lens mode, but you also want to be able to reframe the video later, then use the free frame mode. And when you switch to this mode, you'll notice you now get this unusual preview window with the corners removed. But if you prefer not to have this, just tap the button in the bottom left corner. You also get slightly different field of view options. So you now have Max, Action Plus, Ultra Plus, and De-Warp Plus. In single lens photo mode, you can switch between 9 megapixels and 36 megapixel photos. Swipe from the right to open exposure and white balance settings, and you can also change ratios and the field of view. So here's some settings which might help you if you're using the X4 as a dash cam. Swipe down and tap the settings cog. Scroll to a setting called power off charging. Doesn't sound too exciting, does it? But if you intend to use the X4 as a dash cam, then this setting is for you. There's 3 settings, and these settings determine what your X4 does as soon as you start charging it. Charge only, charge and power on, or charge and record. Now if you select charge and record here, with your X4 mounted in your car and plugged into a power source, as soon as you start your car, the X4 is going to switch on and then start recording automatically. But when you select charge and record, more settings appear below. If you wanted to stop recording when you stop the power, toggle this on. Finally, the last setting is the mode that is going to be used to record. And what you need to do is use a preset here. So if you don't use a preset, the X4 is just going to record regular 360-degree video. But what you probably want to use for a dash cam recording is loop mode, which means that you need to create a loop mode preset, because there isn't one actually created by default. But by using loop mode, you can keep your recording without filling up your memory. But if something happens, all you have to do is stop the camera, and you're going to have whatever just happened on the video. Well, we already talked about loop recording, but you can record up to 30 minutes of video. If you set it to 30 minutes, then you're going to end up with, obviously, whatever happened in the last 30 minutes. And if quality isn't important for your dash cam, you'll probably be fine using the 5.7K or the 4K resolution here.
So you've got 2 ways to record audio with your X4. The first one is to do what I'm doing now, which is just to use the internal mics. And at the moment I have it set to directional focus, so I think it's just using the front mic. So you can set that in the audio settings, which I'll show you in a minute. And you can even buy wind muffs from Insta360 that fit over the 2 side mics, the stereo mics. So if you're recording outside, stick the wind muffs on, and then you want to set it to stereo, because you don't want to record from the front and back mics, you just want the side mics. So to get to the audio settings, we just swipe down, swipe across, and it's just here. By default it's set to this setting, which is auto wind noise reduction. So we've got 4 other settings. This was the setting that I used for that little to camera bit. And stereo if you're going to use those wind muffs and you're outside. There's also active wind reduction. If you want to connect a Bluetooth mic, then you go to the little earbuds, and if you have a Bluetooth mic switched on, it will find it, and then you just connect it here. This is with active wind reduction on. Sounds a bit like some kind of digestive remedy or something. Bad digestion, but it's actually very windy, so if it's working, we're going to find out. So the second way to record audio is obviously to attach an external microphone, and that can be done using the X4 mic adapter, which plugs into the USB-C port. And there's also a little clip, a little mount that you can use for attaching something like a Rode Wireless Go to. So there's actually pros and cons to using Bluetooth or the adapter. One advantage of using the adapter is that you get audio levels, which is kind of reassuring, and it also helps you to get the right level. And the other thing is that a Bluetooth connection isn't always going to be 100% reliable. Well, of course, nothing in the tech world is 100% reliable, but if you do use a physical connection, you can at least see that there's no audio going in because you won't see the levels.
and you can do something about it. So now it's connected. See, we've got a level on the road. You can see we've got a microphone icon here to show that it's recognized the microphone. This is the transmitter from Rode, so it's picking up my voice. And there's also a level meter at the top, which you might not be able to see. So let me just turn down the exposure here. Now you should be able to see that. Just bring it a little bit closer. And if I keep talking, you can see that there's a level meter there at the top. The Insta360 X4 allows you to record GPS data, which can then be added to your video in the form of stats, laid out in various styles. To do this, your X4 needs to be connected to the Insta360 app. And then you need to open the camera view in the app. So then you just tap the 3 dots in the top right and make sure GPS is switched on. So the app needs to remain open on the top. You can't close the app or open another app like Google Maps, for example, and then have that on top. Because if you do that, the GPS data won't be recorded. But if you do record GPS data, when you open the clip in the app, you will find a stats button, which now allows you to add the information to the video when you export. So you can choose between a number of preset layouts, and then you can customize which data appears. And as well, if you record GPS data and import that video into the Insta360 Studio software, you will get an option to add stats when you're exporting. So it's similar, you get this layouts. But I explain how to do this and everything else in my full Insta360 Studio masterclass for members on Patreon.